Hi, my name is Yasmin Tarehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, consciousness, and spirituality. Today's episode is with Stan Stalnaker, an American entrepreneur and futurist known for his work connecting digital and physical realms. His 2002 book, Hub Culture, became one of the world's first social networks, and today is the world's longest-running online social network. Hub Culture is also powered by Ven, a digital currency backed by carbon and other assets, established in 2007 to power the community. And since then, Stan has been active in worlds of digital identity, asset tokenization, digital voting and governance, metaverse, artificial intelligence, and the inventor of nature-backed accounting systems. And I'm just so excited to dive in with Stan. We met last week at a Hatch event and dropped in and started talking about all different types of conversations in the world of quantum. So I am so happy to welcome Stan to the show. Welcome, Stan.
Hey, how are you? It's great to be here and great to see you over these digital realms.
Likewise. So, Stan, to kick it off, in your view, how do you think about consciousness? What are maybe the key components that make up a conscious experience in life?
Well, that's such a deep question, right? Because I feel like a lot of the popular culture and our popular sentiment is really looking at this idea of the evolution of consciousness and how to expand our consciousness and how to improve our consciousness as being a kind of modern trademark of the like sort of self-actualized self that we're all seem to be seeking. So it's a really important question to look at what is consciousness in the sense of our experience with it. And there are definitions of it which can be like medical, like there's essentially some medical terms that look at the factor of electricity over cells, and the conductivity between cells and the complexity of cells, and the electrical currents that pass over them, theoretically or potentially leading to forms of consciousness. That would sort of be, one element of looking at it. There's the kind of human element of what consciousness is, which is a little bit more soft and subjective, but based on that kind of unknowable thing that makes us alive, the thing that makes us aware of our dimensions and the three main dimensions that we live in on this earth. And then there's a kind of spiritual consciousness, and that spiritual consciousness, I think, actually is a synonym for these other dimensions that people are diving into, either through prayer or meditation or even religious faith, or even psychedelics. And that dive into these expanded forms of consciousness that are really outside of the traditional experience of reality is where I've been spending a lot of time recently.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I know that question is so hard to answer and everyone's got their own formula and perspective on consciousness, but I like the categorical, perspective that you just brought. And I'm also curious, in terms of like perspective and reality as binary. I know we spoke about that in our last conversation. Like, what are your thoughts on how people perceive things in our physical reality? And do you think reality is fixed?
Well, everything I think has an era. And, this is like the second Taylor Swift summer, right? And, everyone's speaking about this is my fabulous era. This is my single era. I think that our consciousness kind of has eras. And the way that we describe as a society the approach to both individual and collective consciousness is, I think, a product of the times. It's a product of the zeitgeist. So I've noticed that over the last few years, more and more people that I talk to about the idea of consciousness and particularly conscious awareness, they tend to describe it more and more often in binary terms. And so the binary has long existed, right? It's good and evil, it's light and dark. But it's also kind of 1 and 0, right? This kind of digital binary that overrides so much of our lives because we are all, especially, I think the younger generations, living this like digital life that is governed by the 1-0, the binary, the on off of the electrical current that runs our digital lives. And some of the smartest people we know, like from Elon through to, physicists to some of the most advanced people working in AI, when they talk about things like singularity or synchronicity, simulation theory, all these different things, they tend to reduce it more and more often to something that is akin to this binary code. And so the question starts to loom, at least in my mind, about whether or not that is a product of our era. Like we live in a computer age, and so suddenly we're defining these metaphysical areas of consciousness in a kind of binary way. But in the same way that analog civilizations or even indigenous civilizations that are far older, they described these things in their own language, in their own metaphor. And so I do wonder if they're not all equally valid, but just different eras' explanations of the same kind of phenomenon, which is this deeper veil to existence than we're subjected to from the basic, scientific reality that we face as humans.
Yeah, I want to actually double click on that because like this concept of like the digital language influencing our perspective on consciousness. I love that so much, in terms of what I've also even noticed, the Bluetooth is like, a good metaphor for someone being connected, in the docking station, or the icons, the apps the multiple apps that we have on our phone, right? Is like too many things, playing out at the same time. But I'm curious, like, what are some of the fun digital language pieces that you've noticed or paid attention to, and how is that kind of being translated in the space?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like we're all a product of our era, right? So I just feel like all around me, this is the thing that people are talking about in the context of them trying to express their understanding of consciousness. So, I mean, you look at Elon, and Elon, Musk talks about the idea that he believes that it's a 99.99% likelihood that we exist in a simulation. And if we exist in a simulation, that would imply that there was a singularity, and the singularity perhaps spinned up a series of simulations. And that series of simulations are competing with each other to try and improve the functionality of the singularity itself. I mean, that's one of the theories that I've written about with something called descendant theory, which seeks to really tie together simulation theory, synchronicity, and one other S, simulation, synchronicity, and singularity, right? So simulation, many, many different parallel realities, and we're consciously maybe moving through them. And I've done some work with a number of different communities, and like from esoteric to indigenous to religious, looking at how we can use meditation or other forms of awareness to maybe move through different simulations. I mean, everywhere you look now on TikTok and Instagram, it feels like people are talking about quantum jumps and timeline jumping and how to hack your reality. But there are some basic, I think, theories around that I think are fairly valid. And it's really just the language by which we're describing them. Because, essentially, right now in this reality, we are stuck on a space-time continuum that is governed by space and time. And so it's essentially linear. Where it gets really interesting is to think about if you can use your conscious power to affect the linearity in a more multidimensional capability, because that linearity is governed by the three dimensions that we kind of live in. But we know in quantum physics that there are at least 11 dimensions. I believe 6 or 7 of them are nano dimensions. So they don't really exist in the scale of space that we think of as being like our current reality, but they do exist. And the idea that these dimensions in many ways in quantum physics are folded upon each other in ways that are really difficult to imagine, let alone access, doesn't mean that they don't maybe have some impact on the existing dimensions that we operate in. And so I think one of the really interesting things is thinking about how you mentally move out of the 3 dimensions that we live in now and try to place yourself into some of these quantum dimensions, and then use that to affect your positioning in space-time / simulation. So essentially, are there pathways, are there wormholes to move through different simulations? And if so, how do we practice and learn how to do that in a desirable and concrete way?
Right, right. I love this. So, it's interesting. I spent 2 years studying energy medicine and training on different energy systems. And I find that the relationship between time and energy is quite fascinating as well, right? Because like when you go into these other dimensions, and now it's funny because I think the audience might be like, "What are you guys talking about?" So we could ground it into an example, but my perspective of time, I don't experience it in the same way that I think most people on the planet do, because of this I guess ability to go into different places and time space dimension realities and find inspiration, find information, kind of, and bring it back into the linear. So I want to talk a little bit about this quantum jumping meditation that, it's now become extraordinarily popular. Maybe we can walk the audience through an example of maybe like a couple minutes or 5 minutes of a quantum jumping meditation, or maybe you could share a case study in which you or someone in your, that you've worked with has used quantum jumping to shift their reality.
Well, I would love to share that. This is something that I've been working on as a technique for several years now, and it began sort of before the pandemic, studying with indigenous groups in the Amazon, and then just after the pandemic, I spent a little bit of time at Damanhur, which is a very interesting spiritual community in the Alps in Italy, and various times with meditation teachers. But this is something that I've kind of developed as my own theory. And I guess it helps to maybe lay a bit of groundwork before we kind of go into it. Um, First of all, I had written a story a while ago called Descendant Theory, and I do recommend that people have a look at it. It's at a simple to remember link, which is hub.vg, like very good, /descendant. And it's a pretty in-depth story that is kind of theory, but it really seeks to provide an explanation that links synchronicity, singularity, and simulations. And so the idea of this is that in space-time that we're in now, in this timeline, we can expect that we're moving toward a point of singularity in the future, in which point we, first of all, become connected. So, right now, the epic of our parents' generation was about individual enlightenment. People, you go to meet the Dalai Lama and you become enlightened by meditating for 60 years. And I think our generation is on a crusade for what I would call network enlightenment. Many of us have approached or experienced some taste of individual enlightenment, and following that, it becomes this collective enlightenment goal that a lot of people are working on, and that very much fits with the network architecture of our current society. We're moving more and more into networks where the whole economy is really being driven by networks and people collaborating in networks to drive the future. And there are some like religious and historical texts that go into that quite a lot, and they talk a lot about individual enlightenment ages and then collective enlightenment ages. And some people think that we're moving into an age where people are attempting in their own groups and networks to approach or foster collective enlightenment. And that's certainly what I do in my work. And I know a lot of other people who profess to try to do the same thing as well. It's a good and noble goal. Now, the practice of doing that is actually something that we're all trying to invent in a way. And there are different people and practices emerging to do that. And one of them is this idea of timeline jumping or quantum jumping. And so, at its most basic level, the concept of a timeline jump is actually super practical and easy to understand, and in a way, very easy. So, for example, the Damanhurians believe that every 4 seconds, there are 7 pathways. So I could pause, I could speak, I could get up and leave, I could ask you a question. There are lots of different things that I can do, right? And this kind of fractalization of our decision making is just a consequence of us hurtling through this space-time continuum. Like the past is behind us, the future is in front of us, and the choices that we make over the next several seconds will fractal out and fractal out again and fractal out again. And so the most basic way to look at it is you can do a breathing exercise and this kind of meditation where you consciously move through those fractals to try to find the point with optimal synchronicity. And so that is a kind of numbers game. And you can kind of follow that pathway to get to that synchronous point. And the point of going to that synchronous point, that place of synchronicity, is to be as aligned with the universe as possible. And so, in a weird way, if any of you read The Secret, which was like a very popular book that talked about manifestation, it is sort of like the secret of the secret, I always thought, was that they don't tell you the real secret. And the secret is that you can't ask for or really expect anything if you're really trying to go for optimal synchronicity, because the universe, God, everything is so much more infinitely knowledgeable and aligned than we are, that our desire to ask for something in our movement towards synchronicity immediately eliminates 99.9% of the possibilities of where it could lead you. And so I always say when I'm teaching people this method that it's really important to go into it without a desired expectation or even manifestation of what you're looking for, because what you're really trying to do is to just get to perfect synchronicity where you are aligned and open with zero ask in your position in space-time relative to this breathing exercise. And so essentially you could go imagine you go 4 seconds, you take one of 7 pathways, 4 seconds, you take another 7 pathways, that's 49 different options, another 7, right? Another 7, another 7. You've gone through thousands of potential places where you're ending up in this space-time continuum when you're doing this breathing exercise. And it's important to not have a goal or hard request on where you're landing. What you want to do is use your breath to land in synchronicity. And that is your jump. And we do that 3 times. So it's a kind of 4-7-3, which you can remember to be able to do that. Now, the other thing I would say is that at first, when I started experimenting with this, I didn't take it that seriously, but some pretty wild and magical things happened on the backside of these meditations, especially with particular groups. So we've experimented being in groups where people are arranged male to female, with even numbers, with odd numbers. Different synchronicities have often emerged in the groups that have been kind of surprising, which we've even discovered afterwards. But I do think it's important to be in a sober and serious mind when doing this thing. I mean, I had done one where, we were kind of, social and people were drinking, or I was drinking at least. And an hour later, somebody I knew died after that jump. And so those instances can't be directly traced to the jump, because the jump is in space-time, right? Like what happened before and what happens in the future, we can't say with certainty that they were causal or interdependent. But I've had enough kind of odd things happen that I do take the jumps pretty seriously, and I do them intentionally, and I definitely don't do them in a casual way. So I think if you're going to do this, don't do it drinking, and don't do it in a kind of jocular way. Like you want to kind of take it seriously, like maybe the way you would take prayer seriously, or the way you would take other things seriously, because you're moving your intentionality through a whole fragmented series of fractals, and you want to end up on the right fractal. So that kind of hopefully explains a little bit about what a jump is, and I guess I could lead you on one if you want.
Yes. Yeah. So, I think for people who might be driving, don't do this if you are driving, of course. But if you do have the space, let's drive into, let's try out this meditation.
Yeah. So I'll guide you on this little meditation. And then we could talk a little bit more about some other areas in the quantum realm. So this is like the first of 3 or 4 steps that we've been working on to develop to take you into what I call quantum meditation, where you're referencing things that we know in quantum science to be able to affect the positioning of your mind, body, and spirit in the context of these things together. So, I think it's something that's really wonderful because it's neither provable nor disprovable, right? You just have your own experience with it. But I guess if you're with me on this little journey, we'll take about 5 minutes to just dive into this meditation. When people talk about astral projection or deep meditation, where they move through something called the astral door, this is very much tied to your third eye, to your pineal gland. And in order to be able to get to as much energy focused onto your third eye as possible, I like to go through a quick chakra opening that I've learned from various monks that help you to open up the channel of your body to be able to direct energy to your third eye, to focus that energy kind of like a laser beam, and then to be able to go into this kind of mental process of the jump. So just become aware of your body and how your body is connected to your physical surroundings. Can you hear things around you? Can you feel your body touching your chair, your seat, your feet touching the earth? Try to place your feet flat on the earth so that they're grounded. And then just gently breathing in through your nose, hold your breath, and then exhale down, sending the breath like an elevator through your body down to your root chakra. Your root chakra is your bottom chakra, essentially between your legs. And then breathing in again through the nose, holding and breathing out. Opening a channel is really about like pulling energy from the ground. So from your feet now, feel your connection to the earth, and then breathing in, pull your thumb and your forefinger, or your thumb and your pinky finger together. This creates a root chakra circuit that your thumb and your pinky actually will activate your root chakra. And you may notice that your perineum may clench. You may feel that connection there. And breathing in, you're activating that chakra. And breathing out, this time, move your thumb to your ring finger. You're activating your sacral chakra. You should honestly feel some kind of tingle around your belly button. Breathing in again. Always in and out through your nose. Exhaling back out, all the way down. Pulling that energy from the earth up. Breathing in. This time, you're going to feel your diaphragm to connect as you move your middle finger and thumb together to create that circuit. Nice long hold, and then exhaling out again through your nose. Feel that energy building within your body. This time, your thumb to your forefinger, feeling your heart chakra open as you breathe in, and then exhaling all the way down. Now you're going to love this. Take all of your fingers together with your thumb and pull them together like a little lotus flower. And notice how your throat clenches. You're activating your fifth chakra, blue. And exhaling, I like to bring my hands to prayer position against my heart. And bring your awareness now to your third eye. Keeping your breathing even, become aware of the space between your eyes, the space that is your third eye. This is the focus of your consciousness in the doorway to the astral realm. Letting your hands fall to your lap or to your side. Bring your awareness in to that third eye. The Hindus believe in something called darshan, which is a kind of psychic laser beam that the monks and the Mahadevas would learn to focus. So as you bring your awareness tightly into that third eye and you use your breath to concentrate that energy in, imagine that you're extending a laser beam out of your third eye across the room. And if you slightly move your head, you can imagine it moving with you like a searchlight. This is darshan. And you can send that laser beam anywhere into anyone. But as you just hold that concentration and hold that focus, feeling the tension as you breathe in. We're now ready to start our jump. Remember that I said that this goes in a 4-7-3. So we're going to go 4 seconds, 7 pathways, 3 times to complete this jump. So breathing in for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then holding for 7 with that air in your lungs. Exhaling for 4 so that there's no air in your lungs. And then holding it for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Gently breathing in for 4. And holding again for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And exhaling for 4, 3, 2, 1. And no air now. Holding that part of the jump. And breathing in for 4. And holding those lungs full now for our top 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Transitioning again for 4, 3, 2, 1. And the last part of our jump, holding now no air, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathing in gently. Feeling your body now. Feeling the connection to things around you. To how your body feels. This technique has a physical impact on your body because it's clearing your mind. It's also doing a little bit of a parasympathetic reset, and it's hopefully aligning you more towards synchronicity, where you are in line with the universe without expectation. I definitely believe that the closer we get as people to nature's synchronicity, the easier things become. The more things flow, the more things arrive kind of almost magically. And the more we're able to sense and feel the right way forward on where and how to be. And it's not to say that conflict or even struggle are not part of that process, because often they are. But aligning yourself towards synchronicity, I think, is a really important method and technique for understanding the relationship between your individual consciousness and the consciousness of everything around us, and feeling more tapped in to that consciousness of everything around us.
Mm. Wow, amazing. I'm like so relaxed right now. I'm like, it's very, it's such an interesting, it takes like very little time, but it has a huge impact. And so, yeah, thank you so much for sharing this with us, Stan.
Yeah. That's what I call a timeline jump. And it's pretty amazing. Like I do this more and more with friends, and it has powerful impacts. I don't do it too often. I like to settle into a timeline. There are now 2 or 3 or 4 other layers that myself and some other people have developed to go from a linear timeline, which is what we did just now, a kind of linear conceptual jump, into deeper quantum jumps. But that's probably something for another conversation at another time. And there's still things that we're working on and experimenting with. Most of these are really mental constructs, but I think that they're pretty powerful.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And it's interesting, like the time component, the 4, the 7, the 3, and, the numbers that make such a big difference. And I'm curious, because you wrote an article about, descendant theory, and you spoke a lot about symbols as well. And I want to dive into that because Damanhur to me feels like a place that's filled with symbols. So
Mm.
why are symbols so important to kind of influencing and shaping our modern culture and human consciousness?
Well, I think that there's a couple of answers to that. And, Damanhur is a very interesting place. It's definitely what I would put in the category of esoteric. Um, it they have their own theories about a lot of things, but some of the things that I've learned from just very brief visit there, um, is that everything has an energetic frequency. And so this is something that I've most appropriately learned with Reiki. So during the pandemic, I became a level 3 Reiki master, and I studied with one of the top Reiki practitioners in the United States, who taught me quite a lot about the history of Reiki, from its discovery and inception, by Westerners. Actually, it was by Easterners, by Japanese people, and then its widespread adoption in Japan up until World War II. Its obliteration in Japan after World War II, because the Reiki hospitals that existed in Japan were eliminated and closed by the Americans after the war. Its ability to be transferred, the knowledge of Reiki, to people in Kauai who were practitioners and safeguarded it for the next 20 to 30 years. And then its reemergence into Western popular culture in the 80s and 90s, and now becoming a pretty accepted and widespread healing modality. And, Reiki is based on the idea that a symbol can transfer energy, and that all symbols hold forms of energy, but that certain symbols are used as kind of doorways to amplify energy. And you could argue that this is true from a visual standpoint, like with, say, written symbols, but it's also true with potentially physical symbols that contain and carry frequency or energy. Certainly true with auditory symbols, because we see now all across, research in music and sound, that a frequency is absolutely a convector and a conveyor of energy. And the frequency, or the energetic frequency that something conveys, has an impact on the physical reality of things. There's famous experiments on water. When you express love to water or hatred toward water, it actually affects the molecular structure of that water over time. The same with, like, a living being. When you talk to a plant versus yell at a plant, it actually has an impact on the plant's performance over time. And so we know that energy is conducted in both visual and auditory frequencies. And so I don't know if I've quite answered your question there, but I do think that these symbols that we all experience and are playing with, both in pop culture and modern culture across the board, they do have meaning and they do convey energy. And looking for ways to perhaps maybe respect that a little bit more and to be aware of it is one of the great pastimes that I've enjoyed the last several years. I'm very interested in the concept of light language. There are people who believe that they can speak in tongues, like if they're religious or if they're more kind of, new age or spiritual, they might say light language or different things. But there seems to be some level of auditory and visual language that is not widely known or understood, that exists like a kind of fabric. And I'm really curious to try to unravel that and understand how to connect to that.
Yeah, me too. I'm very interested in that world of, I guess, like sub-perceptual, information frequencies. And, I just came back from Egypt and I felt there was a lot of sacred geometry, and the world is sort of built on math. And, and if we pay attention close enough, there's a level of beauty in it. And that is, I think, transforming our spaces, what we believe, what we see. I'm curious, like, do you, besides like the Reiki symbols, are there any symbols that you hold near and dear to your heart in your home or in your workspace?
Well, I'm more and more convinced that sacred geometry has a lot to play, actually in the whole fabric of the universe. So one of the really interesting things is that in the quantum realm, in 2013, scientists discovered a shape called the amplifihedron. So you could call it a symbol or a shape, but it's a constantly moving shape, and it's only mathematically projected. No one's ever seen one because it doesn't exist except mathematically. So we can only predict what it would look like. But the amplifihedron is unique because it theoretically exists outside of time and space. And some people theorize that the amplifihedron is the shape, it's like the birthing shape of something called E8s. And E8s are effectively the smallest building blocks of reality. An E8 is basically a shape that was discovered in computer science by not exactly artificial intelligence, but by using machine learning to convey a point to 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 a point millions of times. And no matter how random that point to point connectivity is, what's amazing is that it always emerges as an E8. And so we believe that, like, from chaos comes order, and that order is first conceptualized as an E8. And from an E8 comes a quark, and then from a quark comes an atom, and then from an atom comes a molecule and everything else, right? So eventually, till we get to you and me and a bird and a book on the table. So the idea that the amplifihedron is potentially the place from which E8s emerge, it sort of becomes a very interesting point to think about when you're thinking about manifestation and creation around you. And so this is one of the areas we've been diving into in some of our meditation work. But I do think that from a symbol standpoint, I would take it to the E8, because that E8 is pretty much the building block of all of our reality.
And where can we find a picture of that? Or is it in some article, or can we just Google it?
You can just Google it. It's actually, if you just do a Google image search for E8s, you'll get a whole bunch of them, and you can learn about E8s. That's pretty much where I've learned about them.
Amazing.
Yeah, they're very interesting shapes. But the E8s fundamentally end up looking a lot like, and they actually are a very complicated form of sacred geometry, generally more than three-dimensional. but they all flow back into that kind of sacred geometric form. And the expression of sacred geometry against other frequencies like auditory, I think is something that we still need to do more work on to understand. Like, I believe that every sacred geometry shape has a corresponding auditory frequency, but I just don't know. Well, I certainly personally don't know how to convey that, but it should be mathematically possible in computer science to do so. So it'd be very interesting, like if you take like a mandala or a series of mandalas through computer science to express that into auditory sound, into frequency, I think would be very interesting to understand how different those things sound and how each sacred mandala has its own auditory signature.
Yes.
Does that make
Yes,
sense?
yes. Oh, yeah, that makes yeah, I mean, I can hear people's frequency because a lot of it comes from their sound current. So I can yeah, there for me at least, I feel I can sense that perception as a clairaudient. But I know that I don't think science and tech has caught up. So, yeah, I think we
The
can
kind
tell a
of
lot.
basic version of it is like an old screensaver, right? So, remember the screensavers that would translate music into visuals, and then, you could sit and watch your computer visuals,
Yes. Mhm.
kind of pulse to the music. It's a little bit like that kind of thinking. Like we know how to translate um, sound into image, um, and theoretically from image into sound. But it's very interesting from a sacred geometry standpoint how those things can convey. But we definitely have also seen it happen with various experiments where they'll do experiments in salt and other things where they'll play a beat or a sound, and the sound will then, you know, permeate the material, whether it's like sand or salt or something else, to create a pattern. And those patterns are different depending on the frequency hertz of the sound itself. And so, all that actually provides, I think, really rich area for exploration.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think we all have a signature sound, like even just our sound current, it tells us a lot about each other. Um, so, Stan, I want to talk a little bit about your perspective on like the future kind of intersection between human consciousness and then digital communities. Like, because you've been a leader in the community space for so long, and as well as digital communities. I'm curious, how do you see your perspective on human consciousness and like the evolution of communities play out?
I mean, that's such a deep question, and thank you for it because it is really what I spend a lot of my time thinking about how to try to get it right. Um, I think people who run communities, and there's more and more of us, right? And in a weird way, I feel like everybody is becoming a community person because the world and the economy is devolving into networks. Like it's almost a potential post-capitalist solution,
Hmm.
network economies. And as network economies become more and more empowered because of technology and connectivity, our ability to affect social change theoretically grows. But one of the things that I've realized over the last several years is that no single network is actually going to be successful in fostering system change on its own. And the really big opportunity is to create ecosystems. Well, not to create ecosystems, but to actually participate in ecosystems. So if you're a network builder and you want to grow the collective um, generally, the key is to sync with other networks. So I think of it like a giant machine, and the machine is not getting to this. Everyone says, like, we have all the abundance, we have all the resources, we have all the intelligence, we have all the things that we need to fix the world, but nobody's fixing the world. And there are people who are individually doing things to fix the world, and collectively, in many ways, the world is getting better. But we face bigger and bigger challenges with every passing year, especially when we look at climate, we look at the way that information is weaponized, we look at so many different issues that we face as a society. I think we can all agree that we all want a better society, but the really big learning I've had is that as a network leader, and I've run one of the oldest communities online in the world, I've had my most important success lately by synchronizing with other communities and going into those communities and coming in as a humble participant into those communities and then energetically syncing. So I recommend this a lot with community leaders, to sync with other community leaders, really through breath work. Like you can do a breath work sync, not unlike what we just did, but you can do it with the intention of like syncing your energy with another community leader and then emanating that back to your teams. And I do think that that level of sync is super important for helping to make it easier for teams to work together collectively in the same frequency. And, that can be a little bit dangerous if you're doing it with people who aren't consciously adapting or working on building their own conscious frequency and evolution themselves. You can actually sort of lower the average a little bit if you're doing it in a non-intentional way. But even that, I think, is kind of interesting, because we all have the ability to use various physical techniques to center our awareness and center our grounding and to improve our conscious functioning. And so as long as you're doing that for yourself and you're doing that for your teams, I think it actually does a lot of good to try to do that with outside teams and outward groups so that we can try to spiral our own consciousness together. So syncing, it's something that I do a lot of these days.
I want to talk about this concept of community leaders, because you mentioned that, like, if the groups come together and let's say the intention isn't grounded in maybe co-elevation or elevation for the whole, then what does that mean for the group? Because I'm now a part of so many different networks and groups, and I've noticed just the disparity in consciousness that the leaders of these groups hold. So, and it's been interesting to kind of see, the value system for each of these communities. But I'm curious, like, how do you decide which network to, connect with and sync with?
Well, I mean, I would say that you don't want to put too much into it, but it is really important. And I think that we all have something to learn from other people. And so I tend to go in with like a learning approach of like, what am I going to learn? I mean, there are things that you can do as you become more and more practiced with sitting with your own awareness and sitting with your own energy, that you actually learn ways to control and protect your energy and to block other energy. I mean, some of my most valuable lessons have been with various energy practitioners who I've seen turn a negative situation into a positive situation simply by holding space. So, people talk about holding space, but this is one of the things I've been trying to learn. A lot of men don't really hold space well. A lot of women tend to be better at holding space. I think it's really valuable for men to actually consciously take an effort to learn how to hold space, because holding space is hard work. It's a form of meditation in and of itself, and you're in a way silently holding a container of a conversation or a conflict or a group dynamic, and that is exhausting. It can feel like you're holding up the world, but consciously holding space and moving energy in a conversation or in a group dynamic silently is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And I think that the good news is that the more practitioner you become, the more possible it becomes to guide and direct energy in a group setting and to diffuse energy in a way to benefit the group. And so this is like a very subtle art, and it helps to know Reiki. It helps to know some other things where you're consciously aware of how energy is impacting you yourself and learning how to block and clear energy so it doesn't, say, bring you down. but also how to use and guide energy through a group so you can spiral people up. I do this in groups with my teams, like where we'll do a group sync or a meditation before an event so that we can, work more harmoniously together. And I love to do it at clubs and parties and festivals where you come in to the night with your group. And if you do a breathwork sync at the beginning of your evening, I promise you that you will see results. It works every single time for me. When I get connected energetically with like a group or friends or whoever going into a situation, it'll kind of invisibly hold us together through that experience. And I really, suggest that people play with it and learn their own techniques and their own methods with it. But it does make a big difference. And I think that in a way provides some level of protection because you can go into any group, whether they're aware or not aware, and find good things in that. But it also does pay to know how to block and clear.
Amazing. Yeah, being like an energy master, I think is really important in the world of community. And, Stan, as we're coming to time, I'm curious, what sorts of things have surprised you the most on this journey of community building and, the digital community, also that realm that you're in, and especially like with consciousness and where we're moving towards? Like, what has kind of surprised you the most?
Well, I think like I grew up in a very practical, Judeo-Christian household, right? And, kind of all American from a small town. And, I've been so amazed at how much wisdom is held by indigenous communities. I've spent time more and more with indigenous spiritual leaders, and I'm very blown away by the amount of sophisticated intelligence that they possess, and their ability to engage with that. It's very contrary to a lot of aspects of the modern world. And so that has probably been the most surprising thing, is that my respect for indigenous communities and indigenous leaders has grown so much just by being able to spend time with them and learn a little bit about their approach to reality and their approach to the world, which in many ways is truly very different. And you see a lot of indigenous communities who suffer terribly in the modern world because their worldview is fundamentally different than our worldview. But I think losing those indigenous communities or forcing them into ways of living that are quote unquote modern are actually extremely detrimental to all of us, because the knowledge and feeling that they possess, their connectivity to nature in particular, if humanity loses that, it would be a dark day for all of us. And we have lost a lot of it as a society. But I always say that everyone is indigenous to something. And I do believe that these are awarenesses and connections that we all inherently possess. And we just need the ability to have guidance in many cases and the interest and desire to work on building those neural connections. But we can build them. And if we do spend the time and effort to go on our own individual journeys and pathways to build those connections, I think that everyone around us benefits, not just ourselves.
Yes, amazing. I love that. And what an amazing and kind of well-rounded perspective you have on so many layers of reality and so many disciplines. And it's just such a joy to talk to you, Stan. Where can people find more about you, learn more about what you're building, what you're up to? Where can we find you online?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And what a lovely kind of hour to spend with you, Yasmin. It's really great. I haven't really gone public with a lot of this conversation. I talk about it a little bit with people that I work with and certainly with friends, but it has been something that I've been wanting to begin to share in a wider way. So thank you for giving me the platform to do that and to talk about it. For your listeners, hubculture.com is the online community and app that is connected. And we're really focused on physical reality experiences that drive the online community. We also have a podcast, the Hub Culture Chronicles, which we'll be reposting this conversation on the Chronicles for our listeners to give them a taste of what you're doing. And that's just available wherever you get your podcast or online at Spotify and iTunes. I think generally I'm just open for conversation. If anybody wants to reach out to me on Instagram, I'm Stan Landistan, because everyone thinks I kind of live in my own world. But we're doing a lot online and in the real world. So hopefully we can meet up with your listeners at one of our hubs around the world, or at least within the digital community.
Amazing, amazing. And we'll include the link in the show notes that people can find it. So amazing.
Great.
Thank you so much, Stan, for your time. This was amazing. And I learned a lot. And I feel like we could have probably spent several hours continuing this conversation.
We can always keep exploring.
Yes. Yeah, we will definitely. And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about quantum jumping and digital communities and so much more with Stan Stalnaker. And if you are enjoying these podcasts, we greatly appreciate a review, or if you think a friend might need to hear some of this wisdom from our guests, we'd love for you to share it with them. And you can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again. What would you like to see change in your life? And what is the biggest obstacle that you're facing now? I run a 5-week program at the Inner Knowing School for serious individuals who are ready to take the next step in their personal and professional lives. I will personally be coaching a small group of individuals, a number of practical tools and frameworks for creating an intuition practice and for self-mastery. You can find more at theinnerknowingschool.com. I have a master's certification in intuition medicine, and I've condensed 10 plus years of experience and research navigating how to harness your energy and intuition in an easy to access live curated course. Now, as someone who's helped countless creatives, entrepreneurs, and many who are just plain stuck, open doors of possibility they never thought existed, I've seen this strategy transform people's inner states and external reality. And the best part is that you'll skyrocket your output and unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly live to overcome your limiting beliefs and show you how to manage your energy instead of your time. I'll teach you how to create clarity, processes, develop your intuition based on some of the top tools and frameworks that I've developed, and you'll get access to guided meditations and visualizations not available anywhere else. This method is so effective that even if you don't have that much time, or if you think that you might not be ready, this will work for you. You can check out the link in the show notes to join the waiting list, and you can check out what past clients had to say about the program. Wishing you all many blessings ahead.